So then, we are back with them on understanding from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find then the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Mashiyach the prophet. We find layers of understanding in the 61st chapter. We find then 2nd and 12th chapters of Daniel. We find many references of the Mashiyach during the time of the spring feast in 24th chapter. Very important also Galah, the 20th chapter, and also Galah 1:8, related with then the freighters of the earth. As we understand then the 11th chapter of Daniel explains then obviously the time of the restoration period from the Gentile level. We find the restoration period in Mashiyach the 61st chapter related with tabernacling. We find then in Daniel the same type of understanding, but then we find a Gentile level where iron does not mix with the clay. So then we find also areas of Daniel explaining then the kingdom of the south, Africa, the kingdom of the east, China, and the kingdom of the north, the Soviet Union. So then, starting the understanding from the viewpoint of Daniel, we find ourselves then preparing the world for the taking over of the freighters of the earth as per then the Mashiyach's instructions. However, we find then areas of tracking. That's when then the governments are going to start then having relationship with freighters only for the fact of the tracking system, where then taxation is instantly then deducted per parcel or per container or per product. As this then takes place, places then the freighters of the earth then in charge, as in line with what the Mashiyach has said. So what can the world expect as far as mining is concerned? We have to understand the first, second, and third topics. The first is understanding then China is the kingdom of the East. They are the factory of the world. They have a say-so during the time of the restoration period. We understand also then the Soviet Union, they have also a say-so because of the robust equipment production. As it was studied before, in 2011, there was a calculation from 2010, 2011, of the increase of 86% of trucks productions, indicating the robust industry of the Soviet Union. And then we understand the kingdom of the south. Kingdom of the south is yet to be birthed. As then we move forward during the time of the restoration period of the holy cities of the Mashiyach and the Gentile level at the same time, as nations are more aware of, they lived during the time of the deceit, where then devil was then reigning. But we are no longer in those times. We can't lie anymore regarding the scripture. Either we understand the scripture and we become as understanding people of the period of time of the Gentile level, where the dragon has then earned the title during this time prior of the starting of the autumn feast, where then becomes destroyer. So then we understand Galah, the 20th chapter, a certain level, what it meant to each of those names of Nahashatan. So then, based from this basic understanding, then what would be as far as iron and the minerals the countries then are competing to have their products sold? It's very simple. The other nations, they won't have much relevancy other than Africa. Africa has a vast area of resources, some of them, for instance, gold, diamonds, they have cobalt, they have uranium, tin, manganese, iron ore, petroleum, coal. However, Africa yet, from the standards of the rest of the world in terms of comparison of first world countries, it's yet not much developed other than the south side of Africa. But then understanding what then the Mashiyach has stated in Daniel regarding the layer of the understanding of the Gentile level, we find the kingdom of the south then preparing itself of having the best prices of minerals in the market. So there is in fact no competition. As far as we understand, we have then east factory, north transportation, for instance mining, aviation of the robust cargo, and then transportation via trucks, besides then obviously ships. But then we understand then the south is coming then with mining. It's very obvious. So there is no truly competition as far as what price is going to be available in the market. Because the Chinese always industrious, they do give also equipment if then the country where it's at is responsible, and then obviously they receive in return prices of lowest that they can get to get their economy yet forward. And then as we understand also IMF's prediction of the next 36 months and the USA monetary system then being ruined, then we begin our quest. Why then, when the system comes, what is going to be taking place? However, no country in this planet yet has disregarded what IMF has predicted. Any country doing this or then disregarding what they report, they have then, the name is a condescending spirit. You know, the elevated superiority of a country that does not have enough production, only spends more than earns, and it has a condescending spirit of a mockery, that he always above any kind of a situation. But the problem is, we are no longer living during those times of the 1,000 years of deceit. We are during the time of the dragon, time of precision, and you can't mix areas of deceit of the economy and then the dragon. They don't fit. We are no longer during the time of the devil. We are during the time of the dragon. We have to be very realistic. What do we produce? How much we produce? The value of our monetary system, the value of the trades market. We have to be realistic because the system of the dragon yet coming in the near future does not let devilish calculations. You have to be realistic. Thus we understand why there is then this time of restoration, and then the time of the city then is gone. But then, in terms of the kingdom of the south, then we understand that the competition won't have very many in the future. Because as contracts are being made from Africa and China, and also the kingdom of the north, we understand they have the most of the say-so. As we understand also some time ago, last year, the Soviet Union became then the leaders of the BRIC. You know, Brazil, Soviet Union itself, and then China, India, and then South Africa. So then, the kingdom of the south, because of the introduction of itself amongst the BRIC, leadered, or then being led by the Soviets, already indicates the relationship of the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And then we have the understanding of the factory of the planet, or factory of the world. So what would then the other nations would be doing? They have to drop their prices, because the market is going to be extremely competitive in the future. And we understand then obviously those countries that can't compete, for instance with minerals, such as what Africa has, but then there is a point where nations can be then involved, namely then crude, refineries, and easy loading and unloading of these petroleum products. It's going to be extremely important. Obviously, because when the system makes itself available, the number of parcels are going to be absolutely, in quote, astronomical, and the volume is going to increase. We can understand then many companies are going to come, many companies are going to be generated. In each of those, they must have crude. So in any other area where we can think of, as we can observe the map of the African continent, whatsoever is there, the provision of those materials, those are already taken. This is what's going to make the kingdom of the south then prominent. The kingdom of the north, we understand transportation and equipment. And then the kingdom of the east, we understand then factory of the world. These are the areas of the planet with the saying so prior of the introduction of the Ishmaelites in a very near future. So then we can understand what it means, then reading Daniel, understanding the prophet, understanding Daniel as a politician, understanding Daniel as a tradesperson, and then evaluating what Mashiyach has said. Regarding the times and the seasons, when we understand these factors of the prophetic shadow events of the instructions, then we are informed and revealed of what the Mashiyach has said. However, when the other side, meaning the false Mashiyach, comes and then his people, they begin to ponder, the first perception is they have absolutely no perception. They're always trying to be condescending, always above these, never believing what the Mashiyach has said, but at the same time kind of having a tickle in their ears and trying to understand what it means, but can become part of it. So it's very interesting, the Mashiyach explaining these factors via then the prophetic understandings from the instructions. So then we understand what to expect. If a country has, for instance, iron ore in abundance, they have to then to compete. But not only this, they have to consider then delivery, they have to consider the costs to maintain itself then in a trade. Obviously, China is going to get the most cheap, or the cheapest that they can ever get. So the price is going to be very low. But then, because we understand from the Mashiyach that the kingdom of the south is going to be prominent, you can expect then no competition, or nearly no competition. But then we do understand, because of what the Mashiyach has said regarding the freighters of the earth, the demand for crude is going to be very high. So then, what the countries should be doing? For instance, there is in Australia a refinery over there that more than likely is going to be for sale. It would be very prudent, understanding the instructions from the Mashiyach regarding the freighters of the earth and the demand for crude. What would be a wise realm or nation should be doing? Purchasing the refinery, obviously. Not only purchasing the refinery, but then extending more than the crude production and extending the port, obviously, because they are in a strategic area of the planet where then ships coming through the Pacific can be refueled. However, not very many nations, they have the chance of purchasing a refinery, and then if they don't understand the instructions. I'm not talking about scandalized scripture from Greco and Romans. Those junky scripture, those are not counted. We are speaking of what the Mashiyach has said from the start of the instructions, ever since Moshe began his quest in preparing then tabernacling. This is what we are speaking of. And the Mashiyach has stated from the lineage of then Ibrahim and then Moshe and so on and so forth. From his viewpoint, he said, freighters of the earth in charge. Then we have to understand fueling. But then Daniel, the politician, and then the tradesperson already spoke of the kingdom of the south, Africa, kingdom of the north, Soviet Union, and then kingdom of the east, China. So then we understand the base of the statue, what he was explaining as the base of the statue. So then, the 11th chapter of Daniel, we find areas, for instance, Persia, a location of the earth explaining situations of the future. We have to understand those as geographical areas of the time when Daniel received the understanding regarding future kingdoms located at. You don't find, for instance, Kingdom of the North as Soviet Union, but you find a location and the chapter related with the time of the area of the base of the statue, or then time of the restoration. You find sections of it, and then gives us more understandings related with the time of restoration. But then always dual understanding. First is tabernacling, second is Gentile level. Until the Ishmaelites then become more prominent, because there's going to have so many companies, freighter companies, many of them being then created, generated, starting their own companies, and crude is going to be absolutely important. Thus then we understand the Ishmaelites then taking over, because it's no longer is going to be then the number of parcels, because the Ishmaelites, they're going to be in charge not only the parcels, but then the freighters themselves. So then the first stage of the restoration period, we understand first comes the Mashiyach in tabernacling. 61st chapter of Mashiyach the prophet, and the cities of the Mashiyach then returning as they were prior of. Then we understand the time where then freighters are then in charge. We understand the system of the East then being implemented. We understand the ore and the raw materials coming from the south, making the southern kingdom. We understand transportation and robust equipment coming from the north. And we understand then obviously China being the factory. And then not only this, but because of the demand that comes from the system of the East, is going to increase obviously the number of freighters in the earth, in line with what the Mashiyach has said in the future. Because of these, the demand for crude is going to be very big. Thus then we understand later then, the Ishmaelites are then in charge of the whole trade of the planet, because crude is going to be extremely important. So then areas in movements where then we find tabernacling and Gentile level then coming as a team. So as far as we understand as governments, they are no longer important. Governments of this planet must understand there is a shifting coming from governments and freighters. And the time is very short. In the next 36 months we should have great changes coming because of the economical system. And the Mashiyach gave the answer, the freighters of the earth in charge. So expect more than countries then providing their ability to submit and understand the freighters, and then making partnerships to deduct taxes every time there is a label generated. Because not only a company that deals with freighting gives the product, the government must establish then a link with the labeling of a product, with the description of the product, price of the product, and proper taxation. Thus establishing the relationship of freighters in charge, and then kingdoms being next to them becoming service. Then we understand later the relationship of these freighters. Then we understand the system, the increasing of packages, the increasing of the number of the freighters, and then the Ishmaelites providing then crude per the code, moral code of Ibrahim. So then gives us the basic understanding of what's coming in the future. These means being revealed, the Mashiyach revealing himself. However, from this counterlies scripture, you can never understand. Neither should those who do have the scoundrelized scripture never under any condition question or mocking without having the proper understanding of their own. However, if they don't have any answers, then they shouldn't say a word and understand what the Mashiyach has said, because the scripture from the Mashiyach is many centuries older than any kind of a foreign document. And these understandings are from the original manuscripts. So we should understand what's coming in the future. As the Mashiyach reveals more areas of this relationship of these first, second, and third kingdoms, and then what it means amongst themselves, then the Ishmaelites, and then tabernacling.